Good morning, spacefarers, just gliding around the open space way out there on planet Earth. What an amazing time to be alive. I'm not exaggerating. It is an amazing time to be alive. We have the benefit of relatively cheap, some of the cheapest and safest travel that's ever been available in the history of humankind. Don't believe me? That's fine. You don't have to believe me, but you can just look it up. Welcome back to Wanderous, portmanteau of wander and wondrous. I'm sure you'll figure it out. I'm your host, Andrew Crusoe. I used to write books, and now I'm still writing books. It's fine. Now I'm podcasting, and today is a very, very exciting episode all about Scotland, as you could probably tell from the title. So this was the beginning, still in the beginning stages of what would be a multi-year global, expansive, consciousness-shifting adventure around the planet. So in preceding episodes, I talked about the wonderful time I had in London, the inspirational moments in the British Museum and in Oxford. But today, I'm going to be a little bit morbid, because they're maybe not quite morbid, but yeah, you be the judge. We're going to a place today called the Necropolis. But before that, I just want to say thank you to everybody who has followed this show on Spotify. It's growing. Thank you to everybody who is following this on Patreon. That's at patreon.com/Hello Crusoe. It's HELLOCRUSOE. Yes, like Robinson Crusoe. Yes, same spelling. I am basically a character out of a book myself, but I'm real. I have a Hawaii driver's license to prove it. And so one day in late June, which is the best month to be in England, I caught a bus at about 9 in the morning. I got to the bus terminal. I have a photo at 8:52. Pretty close to Chelsea in London, not too far from Ebury Square Gardens, which I didn't quite go to. And I caught a bus, a megabus to be precise, which will be linked to in the show notes, which I discerned from tons of research was by far the cheapest way to get to Scotland, besides hitchhiking, which I really wasn't in the mood for. And so I boarded a large double-decker megabus, and I was pretty lucky in a couple ways here. Number one, the weather was good. I got a beautiful view out the window of the rolling green hills of England. I took a couple pictures. They're not especially interesting. They vaguely look like Iowa, but it was fine. It was still pretty. The other thing I was really lucky about, and I was very tired. I had been staying up too late, so I believe I took a nap in the middle of this. The other thing that I really appreciated was that there was like nobody on the bus. Nobody wanted to be on the first level of this double-decker bus. I was very lucky. So I had a whole table to myself. It was fantastic. I don't know if you've been in these buses before. They will often, the nicer ones will have a small table, and then there's, either 4 or 6 seats, some reversed and some pointing toward your direction of travel. And I got to take out my laptop, and I believe I did a bit of some editing for another podcast. I think I edited an Ascendant episode, which is a show I used to do. Maybe I'll do again. And yeah, I just felt very comfortable. I was really surprised. You never know what you're going to get on a bus. And this was my first time on a bus. Was it my first time on a bus in England? No, of course not. I took the bus to Oxford. What am I saying? It was my first time on a long distance bus, though. And you can be like, fine, it's an hour on a bus. You can survive that. But being on a long distance bus, especially if it's overnight, which I would do later on. You really you are taking a bit of a gamble. You don't know if the person next to you is going to snore. You definitely want to have noise canceling headphones. I had my Sony WX 1003s or whatever they're called. People who know Sony stuff will know what I'm talking about. I can put it in the show notes. And I arrived in Glasgow, which is in the south, kind of southwest corner of Scotland. I arrived there at about 6 o'clock, a little bit before, and I was pretty delighted about how clean and nice, and this massive analog clock on the wall above. And of course, I had been using couch surfing, which I really recommend. If you trust your intuition at all, I really recommend it. If you feel like you have no intuition and no judgment of people, not only should you not use couch surfing, you probably shouldn't travel, because you will encounter people who are eccentric, or I don't know, you'll just encounter all types of people. So I was very lucky. I was hosted by an architect who was a lovely woman who actually picked me up from the bus station, which was very kind of her, because I didn't know, whenever you get into a new town, it's nice if you don't have to do the extra step of going through the learning curve of how does this public transportation work. Now, usually Google Maps will point you in the right direction, but it's much nicer if someone can pick you up. Now, there's something very cool about Scotland in the summer. There are several things that are very lovely about Scotland in the summer. It's very, very green, as I said. But of course, being so incredibly far north, the sun is still very palpable at 9 p.m. At 2100, it's fine. The sun is starting to set. So after I dropped off my pack, my host and I went on a little adventure. I believe it was her suggestion that we check out the Glasgow, and that's how you pronounce it. I'm probably slightly mispronouncing it, but it's basically Glasgow. The Glasgow Necropolis, which literally means like city of the dead, which is a pretty large cemetery where the people have been buried there since like 1825, something like that, 1825, 1832, depending on what you're saying, depending on what you mean. And it's very large. It takes up an entire hill, and according to the internet, which is never wrong, clearly 50,000 people have been buried here. It gives you an idea of how large this thing is. It's about 37 acres. Now, not all of these people have headstones, of course, but I'm going to include, for the people who support the show, I'm going to include in a few days, I'm going to include some photos of this, because it is striking. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful, I mean, it looks like late afternoon light. It was 9 p.m. And there were these like spires and these mausoleums and gorgeous, like, it looked like ivory. It was probably granite carvings of angels. And it was a very sobering but powerful way to begin my time in Scotland. I'm on this hill overlooking the city of Glasgow with the river in the distance, and just so much odd, kind of like very like very over the top. Some of these spires and some of these like small these classical architecture, like small temples essentially built for these people who had who had died. Only some of these people, it was only like 100 years ago. We went back to her place. We had pineapple, and I found out that she made soap, beautiful, colorful soap. And I don't even know when I got to sleep. My last photo was at like 11 p.m. I probably didn't fall asleep until after midnight. I stayed in the kind of the sort of living room thing. The only downside with her place, which was on like the third floor, cool building, was it was very drafty. And even though it was late June, it was cold. It was cold. It was getting down to 10 maybe less Celsius at night, so about 50 Fahrenheit. I try to make this show accessible, so I'll try to do Celsius and Fahrenheit. But yeah, she was an example of a fantastic host. Like shared like cranberries with me. I put in my oats in the morning. I had this lovely magenta oatmeal, and I started wandering around the city. I don't even think, did she give me a key or did she leave her place unlocked? I remember it being like very chill and very easy. And I started wandering around, going down Buchanan Street, if you know that. A lot of Glasgow is centered around this very large river Clyde that kind of cuts through the city. There's little tributaries along it, but the city center is quite pretty and relatively modern. They have these lovely walking bridges, sort of reminiscent of London in some ways, and they have a big cycling network. I came across a sign that was like Inverness is 216 miles this way, and Edinburgh is 59 miles this way, and I was like, oh. Of course, and this is blatant foreshadowing, I would be going to Inverness next. And Inverness was quite north, like I said, 216 miles in the Highlands. I wasn't quite in the Highlands yet. The Highlands are regarded as the most beautiful and haunting, I would say haunting, part of Scotland. So I spent a lot of the day just kind of wandering around and completely forgetting what time it was. I don't have that many photos for whatever reason of just wandering around Glasgow. I was honestly probably a bit discombobulated from the bus ride. Sometimes that takes it out of me when I'm just like trapped in a box for 9 hours. So then I got a text from my host, and she said that there was a musical performance that night at a little pub. And I made my way down. I don't know what the name of the pub was, but there was this great little, like, vaguely, I don't know, like, it's a vaguely Lord Huron kind of vibe. They sounded a bit different. Let's see if we can get anything. I think I got a little bit of something here. Yeah, nothing like Lord Huron. I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Anyway, they were pretty good. They were pretty groovy. And people were very, very, very friendly and cool. And one of the nice things about couchsurfing, of course, is that you meet, if you're lucky, you get to meet some of your host's friends. And then sometimes you'll do things with their friends. And I felt very welcome, which was nice. People even bought me a drink, and we're just chilling at the back of this pub after all of my walking adventures of the day. It was a very lovely way to end the day. I'm trying to recall. I got tired of the sound after a little while, and I just kind of hung out outside for a minute. And I think my host came out, and she's like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "No, I'm totally fine. I have a very good sense of hearing." And the music was very loud. So even back then, I was already an old man. She invited me, though, to a cool little adventure. I think it was the following day. We're going to check out this like museum collection. It was like an extra museum in the Kelvin Hall. It's called the Kelvin Hall Open Collections. So we made a plan to see that the following day. Now, my real goal was to get to Inverness because my big goal here was to see Loch Ness, which of course is the most famous lake. Loch means lake, most famous lake in Scotland. And I'm sure you've heard the stories and the legend of the big monster in Loch Ness, which is called Nessie. What I didn't realize was how commercialized it had become. We'll get to that. So anyway, the next day, I make some more colorful oats for my host. I managed to find almond butter somehow. It turns out that almond butter I didn't realize that it was very much an American thing. I thought it would be a little more common. Color me ignorant on butters. I would be guilty, I suppose. And I always feel better with almond butter compared to peanut butter because, peanut's not even a nut. It's a legume, And I found myself the day before wandering around Glasgow trying to find almond butter, and there was only one place. I think it was like almost like a drugstore. And I wander in. I remember having this conversation where I'm checking out, and I'm like, "So what's your?" I made a faux pas, like you're gonna do when you travel. I was like, I asked the host. The host. What am I saying? I asked the clerk. So I say something like, "What's your favorite place in all of Great Britain?" Now, I almost want to do like a scientific poll or a study to see what percentage of people might think that's a problematic thing to say. But apparently, in Scotland, it can be a problematic thing to say. And the clerk says to me, "We're not in Britain. This is Scotland." And I go, "Oh, I'm sorry." I just start mumbling about Wikipedia like a nerd, like a idiot nerd. And I say, and I say, "I'm so sorry. So like, but what do you, but Scotland is on," and I shouldn't have doubled down here, but I didn't really double down, but I was trying to clarify. I was like, "But Scotland is on, this island is still called the island of Great Britain, right?" Because I'm not an idiot. I did some research before I came to the island, and I knew the difference between England and Great Britain and UK. England is a country on the island of Great Britain, and the UK is a unification of four countries that span Great Britain and Ireland, and there's also Ireland's in two parts, but that's a whole nother story. So like I felt like I knew the basics, right? But this person was somewhat offended and was like, "Sir, this is Scotland. This is separate." And I dropped it, and I was like, "Oh gosh," because I'm pretty sure legally Scotland, like the island is called Great Britain, but there were some tensions with England at the time, and what I soon came to learn is quite a big movement in Scotland to break away from the United Kingdom. That exists. I don't have an opinion on it. Okay, just for the record, I don't have an opinion. I don't know enough about that situation to know what is best. I think that if the majority of people who live in Scotland don't want to be in the UK, then that's where you vote, right? That's where the democracy should happen. So not only did I gain some almond butter and probably paid a little too much, I also gained some sensitivity to the political climate at the time. Later on, I would hitchhike and learn a little bit more about this. So as I said, I made breakfast for my host, put some of the aforementioned almond butter in with the oats. She had a whole bunch of like cool fruit that she let me put into the mix. And I love cooking or cleaning for my hosts. It's very important to me to give back. I realize that I am costing them a bit of money, and they've decided a small amount of money, and they decided to host me. So the least I can do is make them some food or clean or do some act of service while I'm there. And I've learned so much. I've been very blessed in many ways. And that's why I've used the couchsurfing.com so many times. I have over 140 positive references now. And I've used it about that many times. So we made it over to the Kelvin Hall together. It was the plan for the morning. And that was also my last morning there. So I had to take all my stuff, pack everything as small as I could. I had my day pack strapped to the outside of my Osprey pack, compress things as much as possible. Always in that eternal battle of utility and will all this stuff break my back in half. I gave the pack to the front desk. I really trusted them a lot with this, but it was a professional, really clean environment, and they had people and staff all over the place. So I trusted them to hold my laptop, all this stuff. Now my pack, I would recommend my pack, and many Osprey packs and other packs have little slots in the zippers where you can put a lock And it was, the sensitive stuff was locked up. Of course, if you have a pretty good knife, you can, get through the Kevlar or whatever the pack's made of these days. But that helps me feel a little more secure. It's good to have, especially if you go on an Indian train, ellipsis. Anyway, we get shuffled down this hallway, and it's something that my hosts have been wanting to do for a while. And it's sort of like, it's like a museum in progress. There's a lot of like scaffolding. It's very interesting. Here's some audio. It's not the best audio. I think this is a Robbie Burns letter. Beautiful. Oh, here's an old jukebox. I don't recall exactly there's like what exactly the collection was focused on. I think it was just sort of like Scottish made wares and crafts in general. So there were things like little instruments, and I don't even know what this is. And the curator, the curator person, led us around this funny collection of like warehouses, and there was furniture. There was an elephant chair. This is just some of the random things that happen to one when one is traveling. So an elephant chair is a chair where the ears are kind of just flying out on your left and right hand sides, and the trunk is where you put your legs. I'll put this in the bonus because it's very funny. I'll put it in the bonus. Most Wednesdays, if not every Wednesday, people who support the show for a little bit of money on Patreon get a bunch of like background information on every episode. It's really fun. So, we had to part ways, unfortunately. By the middle of the day, she had to make it over to her job, get back to work, and this was like a Monday or something. So I make my way over to the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery just across the street. I ask them if they can hold my pack a little bit longer, please, and they said it's no problem. And I enjoy just like some of the most... There are paintings in this building that you've seen, probably. One of the most famous would be the Portrait of Alexander Reed by Vincent van Gogh, which is a beautiful piece of... it's just incredible. What an incredible oil painting. I'll put that in the... It's something that happens to you, by the way. I can't speak about this incredibly, I'm not going to blow you away with my artistic pedigree, unfortunately, because it's not my, impressionist painting is not my area of expertise. But you find yourself when you're in Great Britain. Sorry, but Scotland is on the island of Great Britain. When you're in Great Britain, or when you're on Ireland, or when you're in Europe, you will just find yourself looking at a painting that you've seen 100 times before, and you'll get this feeling of, especially if you're allowed to get lean in a little bit and really look at the brushstrokes, you get this feeling of like grace. Sometimes a feeling of power and grace and a sense of awe that somebody put their heart and soul into this thing, in some cases for years and years. So it's, they also have a lovely Rembrandt, which was rather haunting. So this museum had a collection of Dutch art and French art and floating heads suspended from the ceiling for some reason. But my time was running short. I really didn't give myself enough time in Glasgow, partly because I was trying to save money and I couldn't find another host. I had spent the preceding, I don't even know, like a little more than a week just messaging everybody in Glasgow and Inverness and Edinburgh and doing my best to set this up, before, because when you're hopping from host to host, you have to do a fair amount of planning. And I can do an episode on how I do that in the future if you want. So as I said, that was my last day in Glasgow. So I didn't have much time to enjoy Kelvin Grove, not as much as I would have liked. I came across a nice aurora, which is one of the weirdest words in the English language. An aurora is a model of the solar system that is a mechanical model that basically tries to replicate the motions of the planet around the sun. Sometimes it includes several moons, and the mechanics of this can be quite complex and quite impressive. So I always love looking at an aurora. Let's see. Didn't really have a sound there. And then I took a bus across town, got a bit of food, had a piece of carrot cake for some reason. This picture is making me hungry. I don't know if you want to see that. And I found myself on the short walk from the cafe to the bus station in the midst of a parade, a procession. And I've been poking around. I've been trying to, I believe that it was, I don't know what it was, and I don't have any photos to indicate what it was. But I'm just going to say, sometimes in Scotland, you'll find yourself on July 2nd accidentally in a parade. So that was fun. And I get back on the bus. This is going to be another adventure. It wasn't as bad, though. Getting over to Inverness was about 3.5 hours. I think it was like, I don't know, like $20. Not bad for getting over there. Might have been a little less. Once again, Megabus, pretty good service. And I'd set up a host who lived in a quirky little flat, as they would say, pretty close to the center of Inverness. And of course, Inverness is bisected by this lovely river, the River Ness. They call it the River Ness. It's very pastoral in a way. They've just, I couldn't help but think that I was there at the absolute perfect time. It reminded me of Wisconsin. And it's the kind of place where I probably wouldn't be caught dead there in January or February, for instance, as it would just be complete gray. It was even very cloudy and kind of chilly there in July. So that tells you something. I arrived in Inverness around 7 p.m., which, as I've said before, is not a problem because it's still afternoon. And I define afternoon as the sun is 30 degrees above the horizon. That's what afternoon feels like anyway, right? So there was tons of light. I was able to walk. Maybe it was like a half an hour. If it was Asia, I would have been able to like hire a little motorbike person, but they don't really do that in that part of the world. And I didn't even know how convenient that could be yet because I hadn't experienced it yet. But I would when I got to Nepal later. Sorry, foreshadowing. And I've made my way along the River Ness, along the side street, up to this flat and knocked on the door. And I met a very entertaining, very cool dude who was a musician. And he would be my host for the next couple, I think it was 2 or 3 nights, at least 2 nights. He had a piano right in his very small living room. And it was a funny flat, too, because it was the kitchen was actually in the basement. Then you had the first floor was it was his little work study living room thing. It was very, very small. And the second floor, they jammed 2 small bedrooms in. So I would be staying in a very small bedroom that it was like a twin size bed, but it was comfortable. It was fine. And we just struck up this totally natural conversation, and I felt immediately at home. I could tell he'd hosted. I mean, I already knew he'd hosted a fair amount of people in his flat, and he was just. He started playing the piano, and I started singing along, and I knew I was right exactly where I needed to be. I was right in the flow, and I looked forward to going down to Loch Ness the following day, and I'll pick up on that story next week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Andrew Crusoe. If you like this show, please subscribe on Spotify and Patreon. It really helps with the algorithm. And if you're interested in supporting the show, you may do so. People at $10 a month get tons of background photos and also tons of previous episodes of other shows I've done, exclusive interviews and exclusive like after shows. And at $20 a month, you get the After Dark edition of this show, where I talk about more spicy things that I would never release to the public. And of course, you can cancel at any time. I also have a $5 tier where you'll get access to about 20 hours of audiobooks. And I also will occasionally release photos there, but it's not as... but yeah, anyway. You've got a lot of options. All of the bonuses are outlined on my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/HelloCrusoe, patreon.com/HelloCrusoe, like Robinson Crusoe. Pause for laugh. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to sharing more of Scotland with you next time. Aloha. I lived in Hawaii for 5 years. I'm just going to say aloha all the time. I'm not going to apologize for it. Aloha is magic.